In today's episode, I am chatting with the lovely Shantelle. Shantelle takes us through the story of her baby boy Bowie being born at 24 weeks after her waters broke at 23 plus 5. She explains the grieving process that she went through after not being able to celebrate pregnancy milestones like other women who have a full-term baby would do. Shantelle explains really well how the NICU works, or at least in her experience where she birthed in Western Australia. And she takes us through what it was like for her and her husband in terms of mental health, celebrating milestones that parents with a full-term baby wouldn't normally celebrate. She also shared a lot of resources that are relevant to anyone who may have a baby in the NICU in Western Australia. In this episode, Shantelle shared a lot with us, from the reality of having a baby who was born very prematurely to what it was like to be pumping every 3 hours, moving her life closer to the NICU, how the pods worked, socializing with other parents, trying to have a somewhat normal life outside of the hospital, mental health, and having a positive outlook and trying to stay positive despite the challenges. This is a very powerful episode, and I hope you enjoy listening to it. You are listening to Kappa of a Doula. I'm your host, Alicia, exercise physiologist and doula. And every week I chat with a mum or mum-to-be about all things pregnancy, birth, and parenting. The stories you will hear in this podcast are real and sometimes raw, but they are all told without any taboo. So grab yourself a cuppa, relax, put your earphones in, and enjoy this episode. Hi, Shantelle. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, no worries. Do you want to start by telling the listeners a little bit about you, where you're living, and who is in your family?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 32, living in Perth with my husband. We have our one little boy. His name's Bo, but we call him Bowie. And his first birthday is coming up in a few weeks. He was born on the 7th of January of this year at 24 weeks gestation. So big feelings coming up this month for sure.
Wow. Are you doing anything for the first birthday?
We definitely are, yes. We're going all out. We're having a birthday party in the park. We've got face painters. We're having a photographer, just to capture those lovely family moments. We didn't get to have a baby shower, so it'll be nice to have all those beautiful candid shots of everyone seeing him, some people meeting him for the first time. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Oh, that's amazing. That is so good. So, well, I guess let's start at the start, right? So, before we even talk about, you conceiving Bowie, let's talk about whether you wanted to be a mum. Was that always something that you wanted when you were a kid?
Yeah, definitely something I always wanted. I grew up pretty much with my oldest nephew. He's 21 now, so he was born when I was 11, so we were together all the time after school.
Nice.
On the weekends I'd go see his sport games, so we grew up very close for a while there. And then when my second nephew came along 9 years later, it was nice to be the fun auntie and take them out to do things, and it just felt very natural. And I think I've always been quite maternal. I like to give and host and nurture, so I was ready. We planned everything. We had all the health insurance planned, and getting permanency at work, that was on the to-do list, and qualifying for mat leave, all of that stuff was planned, and we were ready to go after the wedding. We were like, okay, mark it on the calendar. Here's date night. This is when I'm ovulating. And yeah, it worked out quite well. I like to plan.
Okay.
I'm a big planner.
That wasn't obvious. I had no idea. Amazing.
It's fueled by my anxiety, but it can be very effective.
So
why not?
So you obviously knew your body quite well, because, as you said, you planned when to conceive, but you actually planned
Yes.
around your ovulation period, obviously. So that's good, because that's something that some women.
Make sense.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously it does make sense, but it's more like some women, they're not aware of their ovulation period, because I find we're not really well educated around, what's ovulation, when does it happen, what are the potential, symptoms that you might feel. And so therefore, when it comes to conception, for some women, it can be quite difficult to know that you're not necessarily ovulating on day 14. For some people it's before, some it's way after. And so therefore, and if you miss that window, obviously it makes conception go on for a bit longer, right? So obviously you were aware of that. That's really good. Wow. So
yes, I used an app which was really helpful and easy to use. But yeah.
So was he conceived on the first go, really?
No, so I had a miscarriage very early on. Very, very early on. And that was about 2 to 3 months before. So it was very, very soon before we conceived. Basically, once my period was back on track, then we fell pregnant.
Okay.
Yeah, so it just had to get sort of back to normal. And then, we found success straight away, really.
Oh, amazing. Wow. So what was the first sign of you maybe feeling like you were pregnant? Did you get no-show? Did you just test and then you knew?
I tried not to test because I knew that I had to wait a certain amount of time. So I think the first thing was smell, because even the first time with the miscarriage, the smell came in. And I remember I was at the shops and someone must have been mopping, and I could smell this mop bucket from afar, and I thought, oh, that is disgusting. And then I sort of secretly hoped, okay, this is a good sign. And then my period was a day late. I always wake up really early, and I woke up early again before my husband, and I couldn't wait. So I took a test and I was pregnant. And I left the door open. I was in the laundry bathroom where my dog sleeps. And I looked at her and I said, Hilda, we're having a baby. Because I didn't want to wake him. I wanted to give him another hour or two. And then I went back into bed and I'm buzzing and I'm trying not to wake him up. And then when he finally woke up, I said, well, what are we going to do for breakfast? What are you going to get? The dog was in the bed at the time. And I said, what are you going to get for the 4 of us? And he's still half asleep. And he just looks at me and he's like, 4 of us? Are we? And I was like, yes, we're pregnant.
That's amazing. I love the announcement.
That was like the hardest. I think it was the hardest 45 minutes of my life. Where it was just like, we're pregnant. Wake up.
I love your announcement because it's so simple. It's just, the 4 of us, and then you're hoping that he goes, oh yeah, okay, I'll just get like toast and muesli.
I had so many ideas in my head. I wanted to put like a bun in the oven and then ask him to open the oven. But that would mean that I had to wait until the shops were open, and I just couldn't do that. So
no, too long.
We went with that.
Yeah, no, good.
Simple. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. And so how did you feel after having a miscarriage? Was it a bit, were you protecting yourself, I guess?
Well, it was the first time that we went unprotected, so it was a bit cheeky. Like, I definitely was a bit hesitant. Because we were yet to be married. So I thought, well, I want to enjoy our honeymoon. We're going to wine country, so I don't really want to be pregnant when we're on our honeymoon drinking wine. So literally it was just first time doing it without protection, but it wasn't meant to be because my body, it seemed to be rejecting it because I was having immense pain. I've never, even when I was pregnant with Bowie, I didn't have pain that bad. My breasts were so tender. I had really bad gum pain. I swear there were more symptoms, but those were the main ones. And I remember thinking, this wasn't meant to be. This wasn't going to work out. My body's not feeling okay, and so I didn't really take too much in it. I just thought, we'll plan, we'll keep going. This happens. Yeah, just one of those things.
Yeah, that's right. So how did you feel in your first trimester?
So exhausted. so tired. I just remember wanting to go to sleep at 6:30 and at work at around 3:30, just completely done for the day. And I found out I was pregnant a week into a new role. So I'm at work training to do this new job, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just cannot. They probably think I'm stupid. I can't retain this information, and it sort of helped mask my symptoms a little bit because I just thought I was exhausted from learning so much. So that kept me in check from taking a test too early. My nausea wasn't too bad. I found that it was connected with my amount of sleep. So as long as I had enough sleep, I was pretty good. Yeah, I think I was probably morning sick a handful of times. Very, very lucky.
Gosh, you're lucky that you didn't get too sick. That's really good.
I felt so lucky. I have a friend who had to keep a bucket in her car and just on the way to work, and she had nausea into her third trimester. So yeah, very, very lucky. I know it.
That's good. That is excellent. Amazing. So had you done research around what type of care you wanted, whether you wanted to go public, private, obstetrician, midwife, MGP?
I wanted to go private.
Oh, that's right.
My GP recommended. Yeah. Yes. My GP recommended an OB who ended up being one of the best in the area, really. So many people then recommended her, and then I found out so many others that I knew had been to her. Even fellow NICU mums went to her as well, which I thought was so funny. And she was amazing, and she had a midwife and her staff, and they were just great. They were just really, really wonderful. The service was amazing. She has it set up on her smartwatch, so if you email her, basically she treats it like a text message. Any queries, anytime, she'll get back to you as soon as she can. So I felt very supported, had a lot of resources, and everything was just very comfortable and familiar in a way that made me feel safe. I liked the experience of having the same people.
Yeah, that's right.
I think with my level of anxiety, I don't think I would have been as comfortable to find different people. If something got scary, you want to feel comfortable.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't regret that. Ultimately, we didn't give birth at that hospital with that doctor, but even after the fact, she checked in and she was still really supportive, and I still had my 6-week check-in with her, which was great.
Good. Yeah, and that's right, that continuity of care, it's just so much better if you can get it. I mean, sometimes it's just not possible, but if you can, it is so good because it's a known midwife or OB that just knows you. They know what stresses you. They know how you are. They know how you like information delivered. Some people like straight to the point. Other people like they need a bit more time to process. So it's just so much better when you can get that. Yeah, good. So did she do your scans as well, or did you have to do to a clinic to get your scans done?
A bit of both, because she is a trained sonographer as well, so she would do it in our appointments, but then we also went to a clinic to get scans done.
Yeah.
So it was great. We had extra opportunities to see him. And it was also nice knowing that if I had to see her quickly, she could do the scan for me. We didn't have to book any urgent appointments with her, but it was nice knowing that it was a possibility.
Good. And so your pregnancy was...
Sorry.
That's all right. So your pregnancy was going quite well. There wasn't anything alarming or any red flags. Amazing. Good.
No concerns.
Good. And had you started to look into birth education at that point?
Yes, we had our classes booked. We made plans to watch, like docuseries on Netflix about babies, and we had the podcasts ready to go. We were sort of waiting a little bit later to get into it just to keep everything fresh. But unfortunately, we didn't get to really explore any of that.
Yeah, so your waters broke at 23 plus 5, is that correct?
23, that's right, right, yeah.
Do you want to take us through what that day was like?
Yeah, so I had dinner with my husband, and I remember vividly telling him how much I was enjoying being pregnant. I was loving it. It's the most I've ever felt so comfortable and just loved my body. I said to him I could be pregnant forever. And I was really enjoying starting to feel the baby, and it was so great. And then I went to shower about 45 minutes later, just getting ready for the shower, went to the toilet, and it felt like this pressure valve had released, and I wasn't really thinking anything. I just thought, I've got no idea what is happening. Mm-hmm. I wasn't scared because it didn't occur to me that it was my waters breaking. I sort of thought, I don't know what incontinence feels like. So I texted my OB and I asked her, I said, look, I'm leaking fluid. I got into the shower and it just kept leaking. Mm-hmm. While I was waiting for her to send a text back, I texted a friend who had a baby, and we were sort of just chatting, and I know the hospital system a bit. I work in admin in a hospital, and I thought, I'm just going to go. I'm going to go to the maternity hospital ED just to make sure everything's okay. So I finished washing my hair, got everything ready in the bag, made our way there. We sat there for a few hours. No one seemed too concerned, so we weren't stressing out. And then they put us in a room, had the Doppler on, ran some tests, and then ultimately we had to wait for the medical staff. They had an emergency C-section, so we were there for quite a while. I even took a nap at one point to do the ultrasound, which is basically the final thing that they needed to do. And then they sort of said, once we've done that, we can send you on your way, kind of thing. They wanted to do a cervical exam, but I have a lot of trouble with that. I think sensory issues are a lot for me, and I just tighten up and I can't relax enough. So they made a few attempts, but that wouldn't work. So had to get the ultrasound. Finally, they did it, and they said, your fluids, there's barely anything there. We need to admit you. And we were just in shock. This was probably 4 to 6 hours after we got there. I was admitted after being in the hospital for 8 hours, about 4 a.m. And I didn't know what to think. I was overtired. I was scared. And we were devastated. We couldn't believe it. I think we were just in shock. We were in
this
shock.
Whole time, this whole time at while you're in the ED and you've told them what happened, and you're obviously not. You don't know that it's your waters, but they're not thinking it's your waters either.
I don't remember them ever saying that. or if they did, they I didn't get the impression that it was too serious.
Okay, yeah.
Because it wasn't until that last ultrasound, that last moment, that the panic sort of reached, and they were taking everything a little bit more serious. They were like, okay, you're in. Let's get you in now.
Yeah, and I guess also the ED, they may not be. I think you said it was a maternity ED, but if they're not trained in, fetal medicine, or they're not actually dealing with pregnant women on a daily basis, they probably wouldn't really know what to do. Maybe.
Well, the way that they do it at this hospital is if you're past a certain gestation, you go up to a different floor, and so they're treating people with babies that are viable or close to viability. So if I was, say, 17 weeks, I would have gone to the main ED, but I went to a different level. Yeah, so they essentially triage you by your gestation.
Makes sense. Yeah, you're right. Wow. So then, so you're admitted, and they obviously,
yes,
it's starting to raise alarm bells. They're starting to tell you, oh, something's just not quite right. What's the next thing that happens?
So we started the steroid drip, so 48-hour course of steroids just to help the baby with his lungs. So at that point, I didn't even realise that 24 weeks was the time of viability. So we were just hoping to get that far, and they just expressed to me that every day matters at this point of gestation. So first goal, let's get to 24 weeks. In my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, let's get to February. That seems reasonable to me. It's January, I think, 4th going to 5th over midnight. Let's try and get to February. So that's what I was hoping. So the next day, lots of blood tests, lots of staff members coming in. So meeting all the different teams, OBGYN, pediatricians, anaesthetists, physio, psychology. It was very hard to rest because they were coming in and they were doing my obs as well so frequently. So it was just packed with medical teams making themselves known to myself and my husband, and in between trying to rest and a lot of crying, a lot of busy work as well. We had to cancel a lot of things. So we had our baby moon and restaurants booked and baby shower, all of the food and the venue and the guests, vet appointments, hair appointments, just ticking everything off and cancelling, which gave us a sense of control, which was nice at the time. And just going through those disappointments as well, like there was just so much to grieve. And I remember even thinking in the back of my mind, like, do I go back to work? Like, I obviously not. I just thought, I don't know. The baby's not coming. I don't know. We were in shock. And there was a lot of crying and a lot of my husband holding me, trying to get me to sleep, and just watching my body shrink as well, which was very difficult. I didn't even notice until I saw myself in the mirror that my belly had shrunk, and that was just... I love a pregnant belly so much, and that really, that was difficult to see. And then you feel the fluid coming out, and it was just a horrible feeling because the medication they were giving me made it quite a thick substance coming out of my body. So I couldn't even go to the bathroom and relieve myself without this reminder of what was happening. And it was awful. It was really scary, and you don't know what's going to happen. You could be there for days, weeks, months, best case scenario.
Wow. So at this point, did they tell you that baby could be born really soon, and that they were probably just trying to keep him as long as possible, obviously, because the longer he's in, the more maturing, happens for his lungs and everything. Did they tell you that he could be born any days, any time?
They really didn't want to get our hopes up in any way, so they were very frank in that they would aim to keep him in there for as long as possible. They would tell us, best case scenario based on other cases with similar stats, similar gestation. But they very much made it clear that he could come at any point.
Okay.
But they they don't like to get anyone's hopes up, and I think that's definitely the way to go with mums in that situation.
I think so, yeah. Wow. So did they give you, I guess, stats on like survival? Because you were 23 plus 5, which is not actually viability because it's 24 weeks.
Yeah. They were happy with his size when we came in, so they said that was a great indication. Based on that, they were hopeful originally when I was in the ED area. They did say if I came in, a week earlier, they probably wouldn't be looking at keeping him. So, yeah, if it was a week earlier, we probably would have, we would have lost him.
Oh, wow. That is just so hard to hear, obviously. Wow.
Yeah, so I think there was about 50% survival rate, given that he was born at 24 weeks on the dot. Yeah.
So, sorry, when you're 23 plus 5 and your waters have broken, were you getting contractions or was it just your waters leaking, basically? Okay.
Just my waters broke. Yeah, just leaking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I didn't feel anything otherwise.
Okay. Yeah. And so then what happened from then to being on 24 weeks when he was actually born?
Yeah, so I completed the 48-hour course of steroids. I was really thankful for that. And so my husband had to leave at 8 o'clock every night due to visiting restrictions. So the nurses, the midwives would come and keep me company. And I was feeling a little bit constipated, so they were giving me something for that. And I was on the toilet and I had a bit of cramping and I just assumed it was due to the medication. And then one of the nurses came to check in on me and we were just sitting around. She was trying to cheer me up. We were celebrating the fact that we've passed midnight, we've hit 24 hours, we've hit 48 hours with the steroids, we got that done. And then at about 1:30, I had one of those cramps again. And I said, oh, yeah, I had this on the toilet. I think, I'm not sure, I think it's the medication. She calmly went to get the Doppler. And she said, I'm so sorry, but you're having contractions. The baby's coming. And then she hit a button, and I knew what the button was. It was the code bell. The baby was in distress. So just a flurry of staff came into the room, and there's just all these eyes on me. And I'd made a plan in those previous few days with the midwives because they knew that I was bad with needles and they knew that I was bad with the exam. So our plan was to get the gas to give me some relief and relax so they could do the exam. And the time came, the doctor was trying to do it, and they said, oh, we don't have the gas on this floor. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but we need to get the gas because I can try as I might, but I know that I can't relax and it's going to make me more anxious and more agitated because I feel like I'm failing if I can't give that to you because I know you need to do that. So let's get the gas. And I'm obviously crying and I want my husband and it's like 2:30 or something in the morning and I'm worried about him being on the road, exhausted. And I called him, but he didn't pick up. He was asleep, obviously. And then I had to use the Google Home, so that was quite funny. I I was speaking into Google, telling him to pick up the phone, and
That's
he
amazing.
eventually picked it up, and yeah, technology, thank goodness.
Yes.
And I said, "You've got to come in. It's happening." And I was crying, and thankfully, one of the lovely midwives that got to know us a bit in the background called him and said, take your time, be safe on the road, she's okay, and just communicated to him that he needed to look after himself on the road. So I'm so thankful for that. So they took me to labour and delivery to administer the gas and do the exam. That gas is top notch, loved it. Really did the job, and I felt really proud because they were able to examine me, I think, 3 times. So I just felt like I was contributing and doing what I had to do for my baby, because it's obviously important. They found that he was footling breech, so they needed to get in there and get him out. And I think that at that point they administered the magnesium drip and got me ready for theatre, which was a whole other drama. During the days that we were in the hospital, they prepared us really well as to what we should expect in the room, which I thought was really great, and definitely proved that Grey's Anatomy is quite accurate, because I could picture everything that they were describing. So that was really helpful. The only thing, it was great. Only thing that I wasn't aware of, or maybe wasn't paying attention to, was some of the side effects of the epidural. So the shaking for me was a big one. I just couldn't stop moving, and I didn't realise just how hot I was going to be from the magnesium drip. To the point where my husband couldn't even touch my shoulder. I was so hot. And they were draping wet towels, and they were just so gentle and calm, and they would answer my questions while they were doing everything. So I felt very supported. And they gave me a time frame as much as they could, which was very reassuring for me. I need to know that there's an end time coming. And we knew that if, depending on how big he was or how far along he was, we might get to see him, we might not get to see him. So they prepared us for that. I got to see him for a few seconds, and I got to touch him. But then he was whisked away to be intubated.
Right. Yeah. So he didn't cry when he came out?
No.
Yeah.
No. We didn't hear him. No, we wouldn't hear him for another 10, 11 weeks from that point. Yep.
Had they tried to estimate how what his weight was before he was born?
I don't remember them trying to do that. I know that without the fluid, it was very hard for them to get an accurate ultrasound, because they really rely on that fluid. Right. So, and I only had one ultrasound prior to him coming. But he was 600 and something, and he was born at 623 grams. Wow. Yeah, he was teeny tiny.
Wow. Did your husband make it to the birth?
He did, yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, so he was there with me. Yeah. He and then he went with the baby straight away. And I sort of just hung out. I think I was a bit loopy and a bit out of it, and I remember just sort of lying there thinking, all right, let's go back to bed now. I don't remember having that bring me my baby moment that you sort of expect from movies and TV. I didn't have that because I was just in shock. There's no heartfelt moment, it's all too shocking to the system, I think.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's born at 24 weeks. No one's expecting a baby at 24 weeks, so that's normal. And it was all sudden. Really, your contractions started, randomly, and it's, as you said, it was a big shock. Wow. Oh, wow.
Definitely, yeah. And yes, I was stitched up after. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
right.
I had a classical cesarean, meaning
Mm-hmm.
I won't be able to give birth vaginally
Ah,
if we go
yes.
again.
Okay, okay, I see. And so your husband went with Bowie. So how was he? How was Bowie at this point?
Um, so it took them, I believe, 8 minutes to get a breath. He was intubated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not much would be discovered until a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the main thing immediately. He needed to be ventilated. I'm not sure if he was on the standard ventilator at the time, but he did quickly get moved to a jet ventilator,
Mm-hmm.
which is used for babies with more severe lung damage.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Right.
it basically oscillates and just moves at a faster frequency just to help their lungs grow and get stronger.
Wow. So after you were all stitched up and you were out of theatre, could you go and see Bowie straight away, or did you have to wait?
I had to wait because I still had the effects of the epidural.
Mm.
So I had to wait for that to wear off. And then once I could walk. So I think because he was born just before 4 a.m., and I think I saw him about 1 p.m. or so. So I think
Okay. Yeah.
I rested, and they needed to make sure I could pass wind, urinate, all of that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just a matter of trying to move and get comfortable enough to go downstairs and see him in the NICU.
Yeah. Okay. And how did you feel at this point? Are you realizing what happened?
I don't think so. I think I was actually in shock for longer than I realised. I think it
Mm-hmm.
was weeks, not just days or hours. Yeah, it's quite scary seeing such a tiny, translucent little baby with a nappy that doesn't even. It's too big. It's a micro, basically a doll nappy, and it's still too big. His skin is just red and translucent at the same time. His ears aren't formed properly. His fingers look gummy like a little tiny tree frog. He's got no eyelashes. His eyes aren't open anyway, but he's got no eyelashes, and any tiny hairs that he does have are bleach blonde, so he doesn't look like anything that we had pictured in our minds. So it was a bit shocking. Obviously, there's tubes everywhere, there's wires everywhere. And then when you hear the staff talk to you in those gentler tones, you know it's not great, The staff are wonderful, though. They do congratulate everyone as they come in, which I eventually did as well. Being in the NICU for as long as we were, I got to witness so many parents following their babies from the delivery room to the NICU and see those dads just taking it all in, and I would sit there and congratulate them and offer them milestone cards so they could take their first photos. It's really special because there's no other circumstance in the world where you would get to witness that. So I definitely appreciate the staff doing that, because we felt for a while that we were getting more condolences because people don't know how to react, and we didn't know how to react because we wanted to celebrate his birth like we would have if he were term, but he wasn't supposed to come that early. So it was really, really mixed emotions for quite a few weeks. Just trying to find the joy in his birth despite knowing the struggles he was facing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Something I myself never thought about, the fact that, as you said, it's a birth, and it's really important to celebrate and congratulate the parents, because even though, as you said, it wasn't meant to happen just now, well, baby is here, and baby is alive, and the staff are wonderful, and they would do anything they can possibly to help baby. But yeah, wow, it's so important to celebrate any milestones, achievements, any
Definitely.
weight gains, any little things that that people like myself who had a baby at term wouldn't think about. I'm sure there are milestones that you celebrated that I wouldn't have celebrated, obviously.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
There are so many things that you don't even think about
Yeah,
that you take for granted.
of course.
But NICU parents, we don't. It's,
Yeah.
so many little things, and they catch you off guard every day. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Sorry, I'm lost for words because I'm just like I can't even imagine what it would have felt
It's
like.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So
And it's only the very beginning.
yeah, that's right. So did you soon after did you meet other NICU parents who were obviously in the NICU with their baby as well?
Yeah, so the way it's set up, or in our hospital, King Edward Memorial, there's essentially pods. So you enter the room, and then there's a branch, a few beds, next branch, a few beds. And the way that they fill them is based on acuity. So you might have a spare bed, but the babies in your pod are actually too sick to warrant another baby in that pod, because then it would be too much for the nurses. So if two babies at once coded, it just wouldn't work. So there was a lot of in and out movement in our pod, just because Bowie was so sick and so high needs. Being on the jet ventilator, he had a ratio of one nurse to him at all times. And only certain nurses were trained with that ventilator as well. So we had a lot of movement until 2 weeks in, and then a set of twins was born, and they stayed with us for 7 weeks before moving on. And there was another little girl who was there for a few weeks. She was there before us, and then moved on. So it gave us a great opportunity to make friends. And also the parents' room on the NICU floor was vital in people being able to make friends. The fact that King Edward is a quite a small hospital, it's almost like a boutique hospital, I would say. There aren't very many social spaces. There's one cafe, and that's it, and the parents' room. So you're bound to bump into someone, and people were great. I think people were really hungry to build those relationships, because you sit there all day, you see the same people, you line up in the morning, and you go in. This was during higher COVID restrictions as well. So we're all lining up in the morning, getting our wristbands, doing our COVID tests. So you get to know people, and I still see, we made a mums group out of our NICU experience. So definitely worthwhile. Anyone having to be in the NICU, I definitely recommend having a conversation with someone, reaching out. It's definitely worth it, because no one else is going to understand the experience like they will. Absolutely no one.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm also guessing that because you're spending so much time in the NICU, there's no social life anymore outside of the hospital. You don't have time to see friends. You don't have time to go out and meet. For example, go to mum's group or do any of that. So that's your mum circle, I guess, that you're creating in the NICU, because you're all there. And it's probably so much more enjoyable when you can actually chat to someone who knows what you're going through, they understand, and they can relate.
Definitely. Basically, depending on how ill your child is, the main milestone that they'll give you for a going home date, a release date, is their due date. That's what everyone uses. So if you meet a lot of people who have similar gestations, then the likelihood of them being there for the term that you're there is pretty high. We knew fairly early on that we were going to be there for a while, so we tried to make the most of it. Eventually, we would go on dates. We would go on dates around the hospital because the hospital's in Subiaco, which is an entertainment hub here in Perth. So lots of restaurants, cafes, parks. So I tried to make the most of it, go out for lunch, get a coffee, have dinner with my husband after visiting hours, just making the most of it, especially when the secondary parents' visiting hours were cut short. He could only come 2 hours each day. The other 2 hour slot was during work, so he would race across town and see him for 2 hours, 5 to 7 p.m.
Wow.
So we just tried to make the most of it. The restrictions were very hard, but because Bowie was so sick, we got a lot of exemptions, which was one of many silver linings. Obviously, you don't want to be so sick that you get that, but yeah, we made the most of it. They were very kind to allow us to do that.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, your husband needed to see his son. He needed to be there because that would be so heartbreaking for him to not be able to see Bowie. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, really, really difficult. We were lucky enough that our parents were able to visit before the restrictions were put in place. They each got to visit, I think, just a few times. But it was hard for them. They, despite seeing photos and hearing descriptions from us, when they saw him in the isolate, it was shocking because you don't expect him to be that small. I mean, he weighed less than 2 Coke cans, less than a bottle of wine, and he was 28 centimetres with his knees bent at all times. So he was just this tiny thing that just sort of fit in here. So that was hard for our mums, especially, to see.
Yeah, wow. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of what to say next time. I think I'm taking it into...
Looking back, I think silver linings, again, no one gets to see their baby inside of them growing the way they do. Whereas we got to see that, and we got to see it with multiple babies. We got to really share the experience, especially with our neighbours. 7 weeks with the same neighbours is unheard of. Even the twins being together, not all twins are put together. They don't automatically get put next to each other. Again, it's because of the acuity. So if one twin is quite sick and the other is reasonably well, they won't necessarily pair up. Or if they're both quite unwell, then it's even less likely. So it's all about who else is in that pod. So it was the 3 of them, these twins and Bowie, for quite a long time without any 4th baby, because between them they were all sort of meeting that quota. And we got to see their parents every day. They were there for Bowie when we couldn't be, which was just... That in itself is an experience that not all NICU parents get to experience. Having someone watch over your baby when you can't be there, having someone hear the bad news that you're hearing and actually feel that pain for you. They knew that when they saw our faces a certain way that something was wrong, and they would come up and just put their hands on our shoulder or give us a hug. And, Dad was there for my husband, Mum was there for me, and we'd just chat and joke throughout the day or be quiet when we needed to be quiet. And every win was our win, but every loss was a shared loss as well. So when he had to be reventilated, they felt that. When their babies got to breastfeed for the first time, I remember feeling so ecstatic for them, but I also had to leave the room because I was heartbroken, at at the lack of progress that my baby was making. But it was so wonderful to see them. So you just make these bonds that really can't be broken. It's just such an intimate setting. So that's amazing. You see things that you're not supposed to see unless you're a NICU doctor or a nurse or a medical professional. So it's really wild, but I think taking those silver linings for what they are, however easy in retrospect, it's important to take stock while you can. If you have that headspace, definitely worth looking for those silver linings.
Yeah. What really strikes me when you're telling this story is how positive, the positivity that you have on this whole situation, and how you're trying to see the good. Obviously, in this situation, I'm sure it would be easy to see I guess not the worst, but see everything in a much more negative perspective. And obviously, it's a really hard situation. I've never been in this situation. I cannot even begin to understand. But I'm sure it would be harder to try and be positive every day, and to try and really look at the little things, the teeny tiny things that have improved, or go, oh, okay, well, it wasn't the right time for Bowie to be off ventilation, but maybe in a few days it will be. I'm sure it would have been really hard, and yet you are so positive about it all, and you're just trying to, I guess, stay in this positive mindset. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely easier in retrospect, but the nurses make it very easy. One thing that we struggled with in the beginning is we didn't realise how sick he was, because the nurses are so good at highlighting those day-to-day victories, and they'll say, he put on 20 grams, that's amazing, or he got through that needle, he was so good, or all these things. They will make a meal out of a crumb, basically. So we were thinking, oh my God, he's doing amazing. Not at that point, not realizing that we were in a more unique position. The majority of the babies in the NICU weren't on the same ventilation or the same medications. At one point, he had 3 med charts. He was on so many medications. So they are really great with that positivity, and I think that set the tone. While it confused us, obviously that wasn't their intention. While that confused us for a bit, I think it allowed us to, when we were ready, focus on the positives a lot more. And I find that even with my mum's group now, we all do it. We all do it when it comes to feeding, motor skills, anything that these babies are doing, weight, teeth, anything. We all celebrate it, and we just feel it instantly. We're like, oh, wow, that's great. I can't believe he's sitting up. I can't believe he's got that many teeth. I can't believe he's eating that. So that positivity definitely helps, but there was a time where I was very, very low. I think there was one day where I think I was, it was, I suppose, similar to being catatonic. Like, I don't think I've ever seen anyone in real life have, a catatonic episode, but there was a point where I just couldn't, I was pumping. So while everything's going on, I'm also up every 3 hours pumping milk. So you're dealing with this grief, you're dealing with guilt and a yearning and fear, but also postpartum hormones and producing milk. So very tired all the time, and very hot. It's very hot in the NICU. It's like being in the tropics. It's awful. And then when they put the baby on you, then there's a blanket as well, because they can't regulate their heat yet. So you're just, and then you think, get the baby off me, but also I want to hold my baby, but also I'm really hot and I can't take this anymore. But yeah, there was a day, sorry, I got very sidetracked just then. There was a day where, I was pumping and I couldn't talk. All I could do was cry. I couldn't lift my hands. I couldn't lift my head. I just sat there and I was just silent and I just couldn't communicate with anyone. And I was just done. And I could feel our neighbours watching. I could feel my husband like rubbing my back and trying to get me to say something. And I could feel the nurse's eyes on me and I could hear them taking my husband to the side and asking if I had, psychological support, that sort of thing. But they left me, which was great. They weren't asking me any questions and anything like that. That was probably my lowest point. But I started seeing a psychologist pretty much straight away. They offered services to all neonate parents, and they offer it for 12 months, which is amazing. Basically, after that, I then saw a psychiatrist and got the medication that I needed to help myself, which was amazing. It was such a load off, and really, really needed it, because it's all a cycle of, sleeping and looking after yourself, and being able to be there. A lot of people have trouble leaving the bedside, but I just told myself quite often, what are you going to do? You're going to sit here and you're going to cry next to him. What's that going to do? You need to go home and cry. You may as well go home and cry, because he needs to rest anyway, and you're no good if you can't rest. Even if I went home and just cried all night anyway, it was still, I felt a lot of guilt about doing it near him. And I always tell people on Facebook groups who are sort of looking for ways to handle the guilt in leaving, I always think, look across the room, look at that nurse caring for that baby whose parents aren't there, and look how much attention and support that they're giving that baby. Look how tender they are with that baby. That's what they're doing with your baby when you're not there. And that gave me so much relief. And I just kept picturing it all the time, because even when you think you're fine with it, it'll creep back on you, and you have to remind yourself, like, he's okay. They're with him. They adore him. They adore all the babies. This is why they do this. So another tidbit of advice is look for something that brings you joy with another baby and picture your baby for sure.
Wow. And that's right. I think I've heard that a lot. NICU staff are absolutely amazing at what they do, and they would do anything for it. It's obviously not their baby, but they would do anything for those babies, and they would go above and beyond for both the babies and the parents, obviously. And that is just amazing. The 100%. Job they do is incredible, and it is so hard. And they just come to work and they are happy to be here, and they are so positive, and that's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know how they do it. They're just always so lovely and so perky. It must be so draining. But the approach that King Edward Memorial definitely has is more holistic. They like to make sure that the whole family is taken care of, and the mental health is just as important. Both parents as well. Even though my husband wasn't able to get direct psychological help through the hospital, it's a women's hospital, the social worker was great. She provided him with multiple resources, so he was able to go and find a psychologist that he could talk to, and he's not a talker, so I'm really proud of him. He did it for us. He knew. He said, I don't want to do this, I hate this, but this is going to help us. I need to make sure that I'm being looked after for you guys. And he just sort of saved his sessions. He thought about, when it was likely he would need to talk to the psychologist, knowing what was coming up, certain stages, milestones, transfer of hospital, that kind of thing. So he was smart about it. And we just used every resource we could, really.
So speaking of resources, actually, what did you discover in terms of resources to help, I guess, both of you, mentally? I guess I'm actually not really sure what type of resources, so please share that. That would be great.
Yeah, so basically the parents' room in the hospital was great. They had sort of like a community board in there that had pamphlets and cards from different organisations. And then we just sort of found, with talking to the social worker, they would say, you know, oh, this service, this organisation does that, this one for this one. So I definitely think it's important to talk to the social worker, because they are the busy bees of everything. They will help you with anything. Do you need to fill out your paperwork? They'll send you to the right person in the hospital. Is Medicare, Centrelink causing you grief? Go. They'll make it so much easier.
Amazing.
They put us in touch with charities that provide frozen meals for parents. We didn't know that was a thing.
Wow.
So, so there's a local charity. I believe it's Tiny Sparks. I hope I'm not picking the wrong one. But they work with a local restaurant in the area that donates frozen meals. And basically you can take as many as you want or need, and load up your freezer. You don't have the energy to cook during this time. Yeah, we found that we've never eaten so much junk food in our lives, because you're just so exhausted. And when there are set visiting hours, your night is longer than it normally would be. So that was a great one. Life's Little Treasures is a wonderful organisation. They provide support online. They have a Facebook live chat that they do. They do one for dads, one for parents in hospital, one for parents once they're home with their babies. They do one for grandparents as well, which I think is fantastic. And they just, they have a live chat, and they guide the chat every week. So they remind you of the information to post, you know, your name, your baby's gestation, if you've got any milestones. They provide a platform for you to send in questions, and then they'll gather responses. They are also great in that they give away gifts, which is so kind. So if you're new to the group, they might send you a onesie that is NICU compatible, which means that it's got buttons in the right places so the wires can go on, because it's quite a while before many of the babies can wear normal clothes. And they do that in conjunction with Early Birds clothing. So Early Birds work with that foundation and create those outfits. And what else? They were so kind as well. They gave us a quilt for his 100 days in NICU. So to celebrate that milestone, we received a lovely handmade quilt. They also sent us a care package when we got home as well, with some lovely goodies, and even a monitor for him, which was so great. There are so many foundations out there. And I couldn't think highly enough of them. I think, it's really great what they're doing, and it's very broad as well when you think that it's, you know, from providing food to support for grandparents to, you know, celebratory quilts. It's just lovely, and they work with charities as well to for sewing projects as well. So during holidays, Mother's Day, Easter, those sorts of things, there's usually a little care package. They also provide a care package when you come into the NICU. I'm not sure how they gauge it, how the staff gauge it. I think it might depend on the gestation. And you get a little care package with milestone cards, with like affirmations, and a little sewn heart that you can wear as the mum in your bra, and then put it in the baby's isolate so they can smell you. All these little things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. So wonderful, wonderful foundations.
See, that's something I have no idea about. So I'm really glad you're sharing that, because I do not know any of that. So wow, that's amazing.
I hope I did them justice, because they do great work.
Oh, you did, yeah. No, wow, it's amazing. People that work in this line of work, you know, helping either it's helping the parents, through their NICU stay and obviously the aftermath of NICU, or helping obviously more the babies and providing, for example, clothes that are specifically wearable with wires, as you said. That's just amazing. That's so amazing. Wow.
It's one of those things that you don't realise that you take for granted is changing your baby. We don't get to do that. There's just too many things, At one point, I think Bowie had a cannula in 3 of his limbs, plus his ECG dots as well, and the tube down his throat. So it's a lot. It can take, to hold him while he was on the ventilator, it took about 20 minutes to set up, and they required 2 to 3 nurses. So if we wanted to hold our baby, it wasn't straightforward to take him out. There needed to be planning. Staff had to be there and not on their tea breaks or lunch. We couldn't always do it as well. Sometimes we would go a week, 10 days without holding him because he either wasn't well enough or he had a test that day. He may be tired because any movement was exhausting. So if he had a big blood test or something, that was it for the day, no cuddle. I think the longest my husband went was 11 days. So that really interferes with being able to get him out. And then if there's not enough staff who know how to use the vent as well, that also affects it. So it's a big thing.
Yeah. And so how long did Bowie stay in the NICU for?
So he aged out of the NICU. He was so it's split into multiple areas. I believe it's nationwide, the terminology. So we've got the NICU, which we call nursery 3, and then nursery 2 is a special care nursery, which basically delineates the severity of the baby's needs. So he was in NICU proper for, what was it? I think 16 weeks.
Right.
So he was on the ventilator for 10 weeks, which is, it's quite long. It's not what you want at all. And then he was on CPAP, which is continuous positive airway pressure. So when you see the big nasal prongs and the Velcro hats like they're playing rugby, that's the CPAP. And that was our goal. So it took him a while to get onto CPAP. His lungs were quite stiff and he had quite a few setbacks. One time he lasted on CPAP for 5 minutes. They were going to try it. I went away to wash the bottles. I came back and they were reintubating him. He just could not handle it. So the main reason for him that they attempted so many times is because he kept pulling his breathing tube out. Loved to just yank on it. So when that happens, they like to attempt a different breathing apparatus if they can, because obviously it's always hurting the throat. So there's no point causing more trauma. May as well try it, and if it doesn't work, reintubate, which they did. So he was there for 16 weeks, and then he was in the special care nursery for, I think, another 4, it would have been. We were there for 20 weeks all up at King Edward. And when they reach about 44 weeks, that's when they're no longer neonates, and that's when we were transferred to Perth Children's Hospital, and we were there for 14 weeks. Yeah, so that's 8 months total.
Wow.
Yes, lots of maths and numbers and dates that are just stuck in my head forever.
Yeah, there would be, and I'm sure you'd know, like you'd have a lot of numbers, like the day that he put on this much weight, and the day that he was able to do this, and the day that that's I can't even imagine what milestones are like. Do you look forward to? I guess I'm actually not really sure how to word this question.
No. So a lot of the main ones in NICU, if they start off on an event, then you want CPAP. So you're always focusing on the breathing apparatus. So first was CPAP, and then high flow so humidified, high flow oxygen, and then low flow oxygen, which is just the nasal prongs. There's no humidified air, so what you kind of see on TV. So those are the main ones that everyone's aiming for when they're ready for their first breastfeed. Obviously, when they open their eyes, for him, there were a few more when he came off his steroids, so 3 months on steroids, when he came off the morphine as well. He was on morphine to keep him less active because he was very, very active, which would tire him out, which would then make him worse, essentially. So the steroids gave him roid rage effectively, so he would get quite mad and just use up all the energy, so the morphine just kept him calm. There were even a few times they had to administer a paralytic because he was just too active, which is probably the hardest thing to see. A baby should move, so seeing them just lie there and flop about was definitely one of the harder moments. So for him, the medication, I remember when he had no medication, so he went from multiple charts to nothing. That was a fabulous milestone to reach. We celebrated his 100 days in hospital. We got a cake. I celebrated holidays as well, so I made Valentine's Day for the babies in the pod. Easter, we decorated with rabbits. Mother's Day was celebrated by the hospital, so they provided us with flowers and cute little care packages. What else? Anything really, like when their food increases, that was a big one for him as well. He had to have 7 blood transfusions overall. So every time they do a transfusion, the baby has to fast. So these babies are starting on millimeters of milk. So I think he was doing the beginning 4 mils over an hour when he was first born. So really small amounts of milk. And so when he needed the transfusion, say he was up to, 15 mils of milk, they had to cut that all the way back and then restart because their digestive systems are really sensitive. Their stomachs are small and they're working in overdrive, so they have to protect that. So you feel this success, but then you go all the way back to the beginning with the transfusion. So that was a real setback every time. That sort of, you feel really high when there are things to celebrate, but it's a very far way to fall because you're already quite, fragile.
Of course.
Living through that experience, that was very difficult. Little snippets of information can just ruin your day, unfortunately. So yeah, those were his biggest milestones. And then once we got to PCH, it was like grabbing at something or smiling, and you start to experience the normal milestones that everyone else is experiencing, but those other ones are very NICU specific. The oxygen ones, I think any NICU parent would have that they're the big ones.
Yeah, I see. And there's something I want to come back to that you mentioned. So he had 7 blood transfusion, and this is something I'm actually really passionate about. As you said, Bowie had 7 transfusion, and something I'm really passionate about is informing people on the benefits of donating blood and donating also plasma, because it can save a life, and it can save it could be a baby in the NICU, could be a mum that's having a postpartum hemorrhage, for example, it could be someone that's been in a road accident, it could be anyone, it could be someone undergoing a cancer treatment, for example. And I think it's really important, if you can, to donate blood, donate plasma. It takes 20 minutes between, usually it's pretty quick because I do it, and they try and get you in quickly, they do a bit of screening, and then they sit you on the chair, you donate blood plasma, and then you get a cookie and milk, you get some snacks, and then you're on your way. It doesn't take that long, and it can save a lot of lives. So I think I just wanted to go off that tangent and just tell people donating is really important if you can.
Definitely, yes. And on that note, actually, donating milk is
Oh,
also
wow.
amazing. I was lucky enough to have an oversupply,
Amazing.
mostly because Bowie's needs were so minimal. So,
Yeah.
you know, again, pumping every 3 hours, he's only having so much every feed.
Yeah.
It allowed me to donate, which made me feel amazing at a time where
Yeah,
I
of
felt like I
course.
had no control. So it was a great opportunity. So much support from the lactation consultants in the NICU. Anytime I needed to speak to someone, they'd send someone down. Even when I was home, I would text them. Just amazing support.
Wow.
But yeah, if you can, if you're in the NICU and you're finding success with your pumping, I would recommend doing it because it makes you feel so good.
Yeah, of course.
And I was surprised to learn that not many people do it. When I was looking at stopping breastfeeding, that was the hardest thing for me because it was becoming a challenge when he came home, but mostly I felt bad about not being able to donate anymore. And then I was told, you know, most people with an oversupply look to minimize their supply. They don't donate it. So that to me, it felt strange, but if you don't see these babies and see what their needs are, then I suppose you it doesn't occur to you. But milk donation is an amazing thing if you can do it. I definitely recommend it.
Did you have to do anything special to be a milk donor? Did you have to?
Yeah, so you need a blood test. I think they do it about every 3 months. They'll text you when you need to do it. And yeah, so they just check everything. Main thing is obviously any medications, being upfront about that. And the odd one I found was herbal supplements. So I was taking hair, skin and nails for about a month. But no, you can't do that because they don't know how that's going to interfere with any medications the babies are on. So that's the big one that people might not think about.
Yeah, good. Wow, amazing. So how was your breastfeeding journey? And by breastfeeding, I mean that includes pumping as well, because obviously he was being fed express breast milk. How was that?
Yes. Good. I mean, I remember, because I really hadn't looked into it, so I didn't know about colostrum. I didn't know about getting that in the very beginning. I was sort of out of it, and the nurses came up to me and they're like, here, let's do this. So I thought, okay, cool. Sure. And then just kept pumping, and every day I was building it. And, you know, they were great. They're like, oh, look, you've got 15 mils. This is amazing. And then a week later, I've got 50 mils from a pump. And then it just kept building and building and building. So I might be able to get, you know, I almost got up to a litre at one point per day.
Wow.
Which felt fantastic. Like, I was very lucky. My own mother wasn't able to breastfeed either of her babies. So I feel grateful that I was able to do it, really.
Wow.
Once he was able to latch, that was great. He could breastfeed even with the CPAP on, so that was really impressive. His journey was up and down. With his feeding journey, it was all about balancing weight gain with his growth, but not being too exhausted. So balancing it with his breathing as well. So it's like, okay, well, it's great that you can feed, but it's also making you too tired. So then you're losing weight. So it was just about that balance. So that's basically what kept him in hospital so long, which, again, on the positivity front, knowing that his challenges weren't as severe once we were over the hump definitely helped, because a lot of babies out there, you know, they have such long-term needs. They need surgeries. They have, you know, real lifelong challenges. And I think we're on the lower spectrum of that considering his gestation.
Wow. So Bowie never had any surgeries, right?
No surgeries, no. Wow. So the main things that they test for in the beginning, ROP, so retinopathy of prematurity. So they do eye tests on the babies
Mm-hmm.
pretty frequently. Basically, depending on what the result is, they might say, okay, well, now we're only going to check fortnightly or monthly,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it usually goes away by itself. So that was the main thing that they were checking for. Damage to his ears because of the jet ventilator. It's basically a little box that sits near his head and it's just thumping constantly.
Yeah.
So they do put little tiny earmuffs on the babies who have that ventilator to protect their ears. So he does have a bit of mild hearing loss. He had some fluid as well, which seems to have drained significantly, because I can tell when he can hear things now. And he has some mild pulmonary hypertension. So could be a lot worse, considering how bad his lungs were. He had very severe chronic lung disease, very stiff. I saw the x-rays, very stiff lungs, and he was very sensitive to changes as well. So for a long time he would just react to things. But yeah, very lucky. No surgeries, no lifelong medications. Yeah.
That's. Can we define him as a fighter and a very brave baby?
Yes.
Because wow, it's amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually bumped into one of the consultants at the hospital last week, and she said, we sort of use him as a benchmark, because they reached a point at one stage where they said to us, we've done everything we can. He either improves or he doesn't at this point. Which I think if there was someone more eloquent in the room, they would have, or more blunt rather, they would have said, you could lose him. Because that's basically what they were saying. You could lose him. Yeah, that 50% really hit us. And it wasn't until I heard another mother tell me that a more blunt doctor had said that to her son, who was in a very similar boat at the time. Then I realised that's what the doctors were trying to say. They were trying to say that, yeah, he could have died. He was just, they did absolutely everything. They had the steroids, the highest dose, and it was just a waiting game. But a lot of these babies just turn around, and it's phenomenal how they do it. They just need to go at their own pace, and I think that's pretty clear when they come so early as well. They're already telling us, we're running this, and we'll do it when we want to do it.
Amazing. Wow. And so how is Bowie now? He's almost 12 months. That's amazing. How is he going then?
Yes. Oh, he is just the happiest, smiliest little boy. He is pure joy. He squeals when he sees his grandmothers. He laughs when I give him raspberries on his tummy. He loves his swimming lessons. We go to the library for rhyme time. He loves that. He loves watching the dog. He's such a happy little guy. Like, we're going through teething at the moment, so he's a bit miserable, especially in this heat. But generally, he's just a chill guy. I think he got used to watching for so long. So I find that he's very inquisitive and just likes to people watch. He's just the sweetest thing.
That's amazing. That is just so good to hear that. He's going well. He's so happy. He's so fascinated by the world, and wow, that is just so good.
Yeah, and his med team are happy with him as well. They're happy with his growth. They're happy with his eating. He's on solids 3 times a day, just playing around with fruit and crackers and whatever we've got to give him, and they're thrilled. They were really surprised with how far he came, considering. So at the hospital transfer, when we got to the children's hospital, I just remember them saying, reading what we read before the transfer, we weren't expecting him to be this well. We never see this in kids of his gestation, and even though he was hospitalised for 8 months, there was a neighbouring child on the ward at the children's hospital. He's still there. He's over a year old, and he's still there, and He's got more complications than Bowie does, and I just feel so lucky, you know. It was really hard. Going to the hospital every day for 243 days is exhausting.
Yes.
But I think we adapted, and it was so worth it. And I really do. I feel so, so lucky.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure that Bowie would have actually fed off your energy as well, both of your energies. That, you know, if you bring positive energy to the room, then I'm sure Bowie would have felt that, and he would have been like, yes, you know, mum and dad are trying to be positive. I'm going to try my hardest to, you know, get off this CPAP and then go on to this high flow oxygen and so on, you know. And those kids are amazing at this age.
They hate the CPAP, so I think that really inspires them, because they've got these giant prongs up their nose and it just hurts, and they're all miserable. So if that's not enough,
yeah, good motivation
to inspire them, I don't know what is. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. I guess to finish off the episode, I just wanted to ask you one last question. What would be, I guess, the best piece of advice you would give to a parent who has a child that's newly been sent to the NICU or the ICU, I guess?
I think definitely be kind to yourself. You've got a lot to grieve. You've got a lot to appreciate, but you need to feel your feelings, because if you don't, you're making yourself more tired, which gives you less opportunity to be there for your child. And I think you need to remember, what would you say to, you know, your neighbour if they were struggling? You need to really look after and be kind to yourself. And also you need to arm yourself with resources. Take any opportunity that comes your way. If someone is offering a kindness to you, take it. Someone wants to cook for you, take it. If they want to clean your house, take it. Look after your dog, take it. And don't be afraid to put yourself first, because at the end of the day, the biggest thing that these babies need is rest. They need time to grow and rest. That's all that's going to get them out of there, and these nurses will tell you. So go have the coffee, go get your nails done, go have dinner with your partner. A big thing for me, we were very lucky with the location of the hospital, being a hub that it was. I was able to do all my errands and get all these things done between feeds for him once he was breastfeeding, and just live my life a bit more normally. So get to know your surroundings as well. Go to the local cafe, the park, move your life to the hospital area. I think you'll feel less guilt, because you're right there. They can call you if anything goes wrong. You're 5 minutes away, you're walking distance away. Just move everything and try not to feel that guilt, because ultimately your baby just needs to sleep and grow.
Yeah, amazing. And that is a really good piece of advice that I would have never come up with, obviously. So thank you for sharing that. That is awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing all of those insights into a NICU and bringing really something powerful, like bringing powerful messages, sharing resources, explaining to people like me who have no idea what it is like. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a unique experience.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to get notified of when a new episode comes out, please subscribe to this show on your podcast listening platform. Also, I would really appreciate it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcast or share this episode so that other moms can find it. If you would like to tell your own pregnancy, birth, or parenting story, please head to the show notes and you will find a form there to get in touch with me. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will be with you again next week for a new episode.